Kia ora, tātou katoa. In most cultures past and in many places presently, the mark of a good God, good leader, or a true prophet was the ability to feed people. Food was not something you could take for granted. Food insecurity was real. Give us our daily bread was a plea not without substance in lands that knew the vagaries of drought, storms, frost, and floods. And giving thanks for food is not just an indirect way of saying thanks to the cooks, or to those who grew, harvested, packaged, delivered, or paid for the food. Or indirectly giving thanks for the climatic conditions of good growing soil, or the ability to transport and receive exports from afar. Giving thanks for food is really an acknowledgement that each mouthful of good substance, good sustenance, is a little miracle. It's a little grace that's come our way. Give us our daily bread has a pedigree in the Bible. The prophet Moses, he of Red Sea fame and all that, was accredited with convincing his God to provide the miracle of the manna bread to the wandering Israelites. Though, given that it took 40 years to cross a patch of a few hundred kilometers, I always thought a shortcut route to Canaan might have been a more useful miracle. Just saying. The prophet Elijah was accredited with the miracle of the bottomless jars of flour and oil for the widow of Zarephath. Elijah's protege, Elisha, was accredited with stretching 20 barley loaves out to feed 100 men. These stories of provision, as you can imagine, influenced the stories that sprung up much later around Jesus. The 20 barley loaves became 5, and the 100 people became 5,000. And there were fish thrown in. Nothing like good protein. For Jesus, like Moses, Elijah, and Elisha, was for his followers a prophet who would lead them out of deprivation and into blessing, out of an empire of fear and power over, into an empire of love and mutuality. The fourth gospel, John's gospel, where our reading comes from today, is, as David Gelson says, nothing historical is in that gospel. Rather, that gospel is the reflections of a community of Jesus' followers some 80 years after his death, reworking the stories they've heard, adapting them for their time and context, much like we do with Bible today, and readers and followers have done for centuries. So when looking at that miracle of John 6, the feeding miracle, and then comparing it with accounts of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's called the Synoptic Gospels, the most obvious difference is the insertion of the disciple Andrew and a young boy. In other words, the storytellers made up a tale about where the 5 loaves and 2 fish came from. The miracle needed a catalyst, a boy who believed in the impossible, an adult friend, Andrew, who believed in the boy, and a prophet, Jesus, who understood how the impossible can become possible. This feeding of the 5,000, though, in the fourth gospel was just the entree. The text goes on to talk about Jesus being the bread of life, a sort of communion sermon, if you like. The miracle, says the author, is not actually the bread that the 5,000 fed on, but Jesus himself, his message and methods, which can feed your soul and change your life. Yet let's not pass on from this young boy too quickly. There is a thread that runs through the Jesus material about the little, the least, and the last. The nuisances and nutters. The unwanted expendables. It's they who get invited to the banquet in that parable. It's they who get called down from the trees where they're hiding, like that rogue Zacchaeus. It's they who find healing and hope in many of the stories. Jesus was not a physician to those who had the money to please, but to those who didn't and were in need. He was a physician of the soul. This young boy, 5 loaves and 2 fish, he's not of the privileged, not one of the super rich who would send his servant to make the offer, make sure Jesus knew who the benefactor was too. And this boy is not impoverished either. After all, he has a lunch. But being a child in that day, and still too often in ours, was not to have a voice. He was of no account, really. To be bypassed until he was older, even if he had something of substance to offer. And that is why we should not discount the role of Andrew. He saw the child with the eyes of his heart. He reached out beyond his own blinkered, culturally conditioned vision, said children were of no use, nothing, and saw instead with the eyes of faith and possibility. And with such seeing, a miracle was enabled to happen. It takes faith, what I often call courage, to hear that still small voice. Whittier's wonderful hymn that we sang today, of course, is an interpretation of the account of 1 Kings 19 of the murderer Elijah on the run from the king's justice, though the author doesn't quite describe it like that. Elijah on the run calls on God for mercy, and God sends baking. I like that sort of God. I wonder who the angel was. Or maybe all bakers are angels. Then Elijah does his 40 days and 40 nights of wilderness wandering. Finally, there is the revelation of earthquake, wind, and fire. The big, noisy, plain to see, hard to miss stuff. But interestingly, his God is not in it. Pyrotechnics is not this God's thing. Rather, Elijah's God is in the nothingness of sheer silence. What Whittier says calls the still small voice of calm. God is in the nothing, the silence. If God is all around, in the everything, miracle peeping out from behind miracle, then God is also in the nothing, which is very Jewish, which is very Jesus, which means when theology and prayer moves to ethics and practice, it's those who are accounted as nothing, expendable refuse in the advance of power and privilege, who really do matter. There was an old guy I knew who got a big kick out of watching children's sport. On Saturday mornings, he would troop off and line the fields with the other parents and grandparents and watch and encourage and cheer. He was a fan of amateurs, playing with their hearts, given their all. The All Blacks could have been scheduled to play at Eden Park, but if there's a choice, you'd find him at Keith Hay Park, watching the Owairaka Midget C-grade team. There are some people who are interested in why good things happen to bad people, and some interested in why bad things happen to good people. Some interest in good things and bad things per se. But this guy, he was interested in why and how little miracles happen for ordinary people. When a nothing team full of nothing kids from a nothing club rises up with nothing to lose against some upmarket, well-financed outfit with designer labeled uniforms and a paid coach, and they play and try and play and try with heart and guts and mud galore, and manage or not to bring home the trophy. Well, that just did his heart good. Murphy's law does not always hold, he says. Every once in a while, the fundamental laws of the universe seem to be momentarily suspended. And not only does everything go right, nothing seems to be able to keep it from going right. It's not always the best shot or the best player or the best skilled team that win ball games. Ever drop a glass when you're washing the dishes and have it bounce 3 times and not even chip? Ever come out after work to find your lights have been on all day and your battery's dead, but a friendly passerby has seen your predicament and is all lined up with jumper leads and know-how ready to help? Ever pull that drawer in your desk that has a 10-year accumulation of junk in it, pull it too far or too fast, and just as it's about to spew its contents all over the room, you get a knee under it and stagger back, hopping on one foot, doing a balancing act like you're the great trapeze artist you're not, and you don't lose it? A near miss at an intersection? A glass of milk knocked over that spreads across the table but not the floor? The lump that turned out to be benign? Picking the right lane for once in a traffic jam? Opening the door of your car with a coat hanger through the window crack on your first try? And on and on and on. When little miracles occur for ordinary people day by ordinary day. When not only did the worst not happen, but maybe nothing much happened at all, or some small piece fell just neatly into place. The grace of what might have been but wasn't, and it was good to get off scot-free for once. Or the bliss of having that day when nothing special happened, but life just worked. Part of having faith is pausing to pay heed to and give thanks for little miracles. The little miracle of food, receiving it, giving it. The little miracle of overcoming your fear and offering the solidarity of your lunch. The little miracle of trusting that a child holds the answer to a multitude's need. The little miracle of seeing with the heart, when seeing with the eyes doesn't tell all the truth. The little miracle of hearing God, not in loud, powerful, authoritative tones, earthquake, wind, and fire, but in the stillness, smallness, and profoundness of sheer nothing. The miracle of surviving the day, of seeing some good happen, of enduring some bad, and still being able to give thanks at the meal table that evening. The little miracle that happens even to us, even on our worst days, when chance gives us a break, the sun peeps out, our fears are parked out of sight, and we greet the world with smiles, kindness, and optimism. And when we look down, we find a hand holding our own. A little miracle. Blessings to you and all whom you love this week.